I'm really humbled that you're wanting to learn more about LC3 Collaborative and the collective impact strategy. And I know that this is the very last workshop, and we've been through a long day. So I'm really humbled and appreciative that you're here and willing to learn and listen to us. My name is Ann Vasquez, and I'm with Families and Youth Incorporated, and I'm the LC3 Collaborative Coordinator. And with me today is my esteemed colleague, Jessica Romero. I don't know if you wanted to say hi, Jess.
Hello, Jessica. Nice to meet you.
Jessica is the LC3 Collaborative Community Organizer, also with FYI. And I just really wanted to take a moment to really thank you, Jess, for all the work that you have done in planning this conference. I know that we've had a couple of teams planning the conference, including Lisa, and it's taken all of us to put this together. But Jess has just gone above and beyond to really make sure every single detail is in order. And so thank you so much, Jess. And, you know, we were joking that we may have to deliver her son here at the conference. So she's really hanging in there. And Logan had to leave, but you've seen him around as well. He's helped today. He's the LC3 Special Projects Coordinator and also an intern for the Masters of Social Work. An intern at FYI, and then we have another intern, Paris Garcia, from the Public Health Department, who couldn't be with us today. So really just objectives for the presentation. We're going to give a quick history and overview of the LC3 Collaborative and the 5 components of the collective impact strategy, which is the framework that has moved our collaborative forward. So we're really just going to do quick introductions. We were going to do a Menti if there was, if the room was full. But really, let's just go around the room since there's a few of us and introduce ourselves. And maybe you want to say a little bit about something that you've learned new today. And I know, Jess, we've already introduced you, but I don't know if you want to start and say something that you've learned that's new to you today.
Well, I think really one thing that stood out to me was in Cassandra's keynote, the cultural backpack. And I just thought it's just so impactful, just using that in your daily life, and that's just really, I just thought such a powerful way to start the day. So that was something that stood out to me today.
Thanks, Jess.
I'm Sean Whitty. I'm a school psychologist with the Las Cruces Public Schools. And I think, kind of reflecting on what I've learned is it's been nice to kind of know some of the things that are in our community, kind of supporting people. I think about I did the Juntos in the morning here in this room, and to hear about what FYI has to offer for people in the community and kind of helping kind of people. And I'm also looking forward to hearing more about kind of what you've got going on as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks for being with us today. Would you like to go next?
I actually work with the RI International, the triage, the crisis triage center. And so I'm glad to see, because I actually started off at FYI years back. And I did my internship there. So I learned a lot from FYI. And I'm glad to see that there's still a lot of, even though we're evolving and there's more and more coming, and then with the whole COVID, that there's still a lot of places resources for people, because they need it even more so now than ever. So that's great to see.
Absolutely. And now the Crisis Triage Center is a resource as well in our community.
And hopefully we'll be able to get that off the ground and start having more referrals come our way.
Yes, for sure. So thank you, Sally. Brian, we're just going around introducing ourselves and then just maybe something you learned that's new today.
Brian Kavanaugh, CEO of Families and Youth Incorporated. Hello. And I'm just really impressed that, at least for myself, it's one of the first in-person conferences that I've been to for a while, particularly in the southern part of New Mexico. And it's just really encouraging that, the turnout and that people you know, from different sectors within the agency, providers, agencies, government, city, Las Cruces Public Schools, you know, all showed up today in one form or another with representatives. And it's just really encouraging and motivating to know that people are still, you know, engaged and motivated to learn more and see what the community has to offer. And just a good chance to network and gain some more skills and knowledge and contacts. So just really impressed with, you know, the sponsors and everybody who had something to do with putting this conference on. So.
I agree. I love the turnout. It's been a great turnout today, especially with the challenges of COVID and just not knowing, you know, what was happening as we're planning and hoping that we would still be able to be in person. So thanks for all of your support in all of this and bringing this together as well. Lisa?
I'm Lisa Chavez, I'm the clinical director here at FYI, and I think probably a big takeaway for me today, I was going to say that also, was just seeing the turnout, really just seeing people already to start learning again and be in the community. Was happy to see a lot of LCPS people here because I think I worked in the schools and I think oftentimes they sometimes lack those training pieces for people outside of the school, right? And I agree with Jess. I think that key takeaway in that backpack, that cultural backpack, was a cool visual. Something to think about when I'm staffing cases or working with families. So.
Awesome. And your presentation was really good. I enjoyed it. So thanks. Alyssa?
I'm Alyssa with the House of Color LVP influencer. What I read today was, that stood out to me was the
Michelle's presentation, the attachment presentation.
Oh, I really wanted to be in that one. But there are so many good ones that it's really hard to choose. So if you haven't heard or if you haven't seen on the program, there'll be some repeats tomorrow. So if maybe you missed one today, you'll be able to catch it tomorrow. So good point. Hopefully, if Michelle is doing it, I'll be able to attend hers. But I really wanted to take a minute for us to go around the room, especially since it's an intimate and smaller crowd, because collaborative work is really all about relationship building. That's really the core of the core value that you bring to the table when you're working collectively. And so it's really important to take every opportunity to strengthen relationships around you. And I know we see each other, we network with one another when we're in the community, but being able to take it further to really get to know each other is really important in the work that we do. So thank you for indulging me in that. And so I'm just really going to start with a history of local collaboratives in New Mexico, and some of you may already know the history, but they were really created by the state of New Mexico, the BHSD, Behavioral Health Services Division, as a unique reform of managed behavioral health care in 2005. And they were very minimally funded from 2005 to 2017. And when I say minimal funds, they received probably about anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000 to operate, to come together, to maybe employ a part-time staff to bring the collaborative to fruition. And really the main purpose behind it was sometimes our local communities feel disconnected from the decision-making that's happening at the state level. And so they wanted to try and bridge that gap. And the local collaboratives were a way to do that and bring a real grassroots local voice to the state. And so, of course, there were some specific functions that were outlined by the state of New Mexico that they wanted the collaboratives to perform. And they're outlined here as far as a community needs assessment, right? Really digging into communities to see what were the needs of the local people who were using the services of behavioral health. And then once you were able to dig into that data, then you're able to take a 30,000-foot view and really identify the service gaps in your behavioral health infrastructure. And that's so important to collect that data and really know what's happening in your community around behavioral health. Who's being served, who's utilizing the services, where are the wait lists, where are the gaps. And then as a collective and a collaborative coming together, both individuals, people, clients, consumers, to then recommend what are we going to do to address those gaps. And the gaps, as you could probably assume in many communities, are large. And no single individual or no single agency or organization can address those gaps on their own. So it really takes the collective and collaborative effort, sort of like a think tank, come together. How are we going to prioritize what we're seeing? And where's that need the greatest so that we can tackle those needs first? And then, of course, in that is capacity building, training, technical assistance, and then just the coordination across multiple agencies. So you can see that these are the original local collaboratives in the state of New Mexico. And in Doniana, we're Local Collaborative 3. And so everybody knows us as LC3. So I'm going to fast forward to 2013, because if you've worked in behavioral health care, you know about the shakeup of 2013. You've experienced it and or you've heard about the devastation of 2013. And even some people refer to the shakeup as Hurricane Katrina. Now, if you think of the devastation that a hurricane leaves behind in a community, it really is destruction. It's a major loss of everything, infrastructure. People feel losses in their lives, of livelihoods. And really, that describes the shakeup that happened in 2013 in our behavioral health system. And so local collaboratives from 2005 to 2013 and the behavioral health system were coming together, of course, providing services, mostly through Medicaid, because our population that we serve, we have a huge population that utilizes Medicaid and receives services because of Medicaid, especially when we expanded Medicaid in the state. So just to give you a brief overview for those who are not familiar, in 2013, during former Governor Susana Martinez's administration, she did an audit, or the state conducted an audit that found, quote unquote, credible evidence of fraud, and cut off Medicaid payments to 15 mental health providers. And I know 15 doesn't sound like a lot, but really when you look at who the providers were, who they serviced, even providers like FYI, and Brian, you could probably jump in and take this part of the presentation yourself, so feel free.
And just one quick note that 15 providers provided over 86% of the behavioral health services in the entire state of New Mexico.
Yes, it was huge. Thank you for that. I mean, that's almost 90% of who we're serving in the state of New Mexico. And so when you cut off Medicaid, right, that's like cutting off your lifeline to many of our providers and to people who are receiving services in our community. So once that happened and you just had to really shut down from almost one day to the next, providers from Arizona came in to try to replace the services that were happening here in New Mexico, which was caused even more of a disruption and delay in treatment for our behavioral health, our mental health, substance use services, especially to low-income New Mexicans. Again, many of the accused providers were forced to close, some of them whose doors are still closed today. And besides people who lost their services, hundreds of people lost their jobs. And so really it was loss and devastation across the state of New Mexico. and for what? Because it was founded by Attorney General Hector Balderas after the investigation that there were really no violations at all. Maybe small violations, but not the $36 million of fraud that these providers were being accused of. So all of this devastation really could have been avoided. And so that's just really a small overview of 2013. And as I go on, you'll see why it's relevant to the local collaborative today. So I quickly wanted to show you, not in my words, but this is the Shake Up documentary that was produced in 2019 of that devastation in New Mexico. If it's on Amazon or Amazon Prime, so if you're a user, it's like $1.99 to rent. And I just really recommend that if you're not familiar or you haven't lived through it, that this is a really good overview, and it tells the story of what happened in 2013. So let me see. So I'm just going to show the beginning.
This building has been part of Ogata since 1978. This was my home for 37 years.
Everybody ready?
I would say that over the years that we have served probably around 25,000 children or adolescents.
Welcome to the second annual Ogata's Talent Show.
We were known in the community as taking the kids that other people wouldn't take. Kids who were schizophrenic, bipolar, kids that had a serious mental illness. People did not believe that the allegation of fraud had merit. And of course, we were all cleared, so the allegations were not true, which makes this whole event more tragic because all of it was for naught. We were all closed for no good reason, and people and clients and kids were impacted. I'm not over it, as you can tell.
That's so emotional, and that's just the beginning. There's so many stories that are shared in this documentary about how it impacted people's livelihoods, and it really was tragic. But what struck me, even just from that little clip, is when she said that this was my home for 37 years. I just can't imagine having to close my doors after that long. And then she talked about serving about 25,000 children and kids that came through her door. So again, like Brian said, you multiply that 25,000 times the 15 providers that were affected by this, and you're talking about 375,000 lives that may have been affected. So this is a really critical incident and disruption in behavioral health in New Mexico, and it's just really important to understand this history. So LC3, for the most part, was a two-legged stool. We had the state's mandate when they created local collaboratives, and then we had the 2013 shakeup. I came to be the coordinator of LC3 in 2019, and so again, Brian, if you want to jump in to anything I say and add anything, I'd be appreciative of that. So really, at that time then, through that loss and devastation, and LC3 has sat in different agencies around the community, but you have to pause, like we're doing now in the pandemic, and reflect on what is happening and how we want to move forward. And do we want to move forward together? And what are the discrepancies in the system, the inequities in the system that the disruption has really brought to the surface? And then how do we want to repair that and really bounce back in a better way so that we create a more resilient system moving forward? And so back then in LC3, someone asked the question, what's missing, right? Because we all know that a two-legged stool is not functional. You can't sit on it, you can't stand on it. It really doesn't offer any stability for how we move forward together in the future. And so the answer to that was to bring in that third leg, which is coordination, and that's where collective impact strategy really comes in. Collective impact strategy offers the framework of intentional coordination, right? So it's one thing to be able to say, we want to work on this, we recognize that this needs work. The system really is a bully. This system really dares you to change it because it's going to stay the same. If no one steps up to it, then it's going to stay the same. And if the system were working for everyone, we wouldn't want to change it. We wouldn't want to have a vision for the future. And disruption really brings out all of the inequities in the system, as we have seen through this pandemic. And so we have to be very intentional. So when someone asks the question about what's missing, that's intentionality. And the only way things are going to change is if we are deliberately working together to make that change. And so the third leg of the stool was coordination, and coordinating how. So back then it was decided that the collaborative needed some funding, a backbone organization, and a framework to offer some of that coordination and stability. And so that's what FYI at the time, and Jolene Martinez, who really LC3 the way it stands now, and the different board of directors of LC3, like Micah Pearson from NAMI, and Susana Santillan, and Linda Fisher, they all collectively decided that they would write a grant to Paso del Norte Health Foundation, and we were able to get funding. They decided that the Collective Impact Strategy Initiative is the framework we would use moving forward, and then that LC3 would live at the Families and Youth Incorporated, FYI, is our backbone agency, and that's where LC3 staff is housed. So we represent 184 key stakeholders in 70 different cross-sector agencies, public and private agencies. We have 11-member board of directors. We are the behavioral health sector of the resilience leaders of Doña Ana County that you may have heard Mayor Pro Tem talk about this morning. And we serve the communities of Doña Ana County, and we're based here in Las Cruces. So I just wanted to show you our board of directors because I think they're really diverse, and they're also very representative of our behavioral health system today. There's Mary Ann, there's Paul Ford, Judy Baca, so a lot of them are here presenting at our summit today. And so we have, again, we have the Las Cruces Fire Department with Paul. We have private entities like Peak Behavioral Health, Mesilla Valley Hospital. We have Julie, who sits on our board as well, and then Mary Ann, who's at CYFD. So you can see that we have a really diverse and experienced board of directors. We also have international, national, regional, state, and local partners that partner with the LC3 staff to bring all sorts of different resources to the members and really build our capacity and help us to grow as a team. So these are all of the different partners, from strategic consultants to evaluators, to our training and technical assistance partners. So I wanted to show you just a quick highlight video from 2019 to 2020, again, just so that you can hear directly from our board members and just sort of see some highlights of what we've done in the community. And so that you don't have to always hear me talk.
Collective impact is the commitment of a group of important actors from different sectors to a common agenda for solving a specific social problem at scale.
LC3 is a group of incredible professionals who all, in some form or capacity, are in behavioral health together in the community, our Las Cruces and surrounding communities. We do not see ourselves as competitors with each other, but rather we are in this together in our community, and that's what I love about LC3.
Another positive step has been the emergence of the local Collaborative 3, or LC3, growing out of the Doña Ana Behavioral Health Collaborative and operating within Families and Youth, Inc. LC3 has taken on a role similar to be played by our local Success Partnership for Behavioral Health Education, the creation of a diverse cross-sector coalition to coordinate and align with a jointly developed plan and vision. The work of all of the many heroic individuals and organizations that make up the behavioral health system for members of our community.
Working in behavioral health care is not something that everybody wants to do. And I think what inspires me is that I really feel like I have an ethical and moral responsibility to care for people who often are stigmatized or who often can be seen as the very least. And I have a responsibility as a nurse to make sure that they get the best care that they can get and the advocacy that they need and the space to feel safe and to know that treatment works and that recovery is possible and that there is hope.
My mental health does not define me, and your mental health does not define you. By sharing our stories, together we can break the stigma of mental health. Always remember that every life matters and every day counts.
People are not coming here to get their diagnosis. They're not coming here because they are questioning about where they're at as far as their mental health. They're coming here because they're in crisis.
Sandra Gandara, Mayor Pro Tem for the City of Las Cruces. I founded the Las Cruces Suicide Prevention Task Force after a series of youth completing suicide in the child welfare system.
I haven't watched this video in a minute, and that was done for 2019 and 2020, and even watching it and seeing the growth that we've done and the growth that we've had from that year to this year, I think is really incredible. So it was really cool to watch that video. But those are just some of the highlights of how we're involved in the community. And the one thing that I forgot to say at the beginning is the LC3 Collaborative is really an outlier in that we do macro level systems change work. And so we're not providing direct services to anyone, but the result is we're hoping that we change decision makers' minds. We really shift the mindset in behavioral health. We show the need in our community. And the result of that, though, is to really increase access for people in our communities. And so it's so important to have everyone who's at the table so that their voice is heard in this process. So here's our aspiration, and really also collective work is about having a vision. And so I'm making the assumption that if you're in the room today and you're interested in learning about this, it's because you have a different vision of how behavioral health is or should be in our community. And so we really aspire to that vision. And another reason that it takes all of us to come together to achieve that vision in Doña Ana County. And so our objectives, again, going back to the two-legged stool, is we really wanted to restore the system disruptions that resulted from the 2013 shutdown. And that was really important to us. And within that, we were hoping that we could increase regional training capacity and evidence-based practices. We've had all sorts of different trainings, and you saw some of them in the highlight video, such as our Wellness Wednesdays and our Monday Mindsets. And the last time that I took a look at the numbers, we had easily trained, I think, over 350 people in all of the trainings that we've provided to our LC3 members and community. And our last objective is we hope to develop services and programs that fill those service continuum gaps. And again, that's just really the end. The end game is that we're helping people access more services. And so our aspiration is to build the ideal behavioral health system, which includes all of these things and really puts people at the center. So again, you have point A, which is really how are you taking a look at your existing behavioral health infrastructure and then building the ideal behavioral health system, which is point B, right? And then the gap in between is really trying to build that roadmap to get from point A to point B. And again, so if you go back to the state's blueprint, LC3 is fulfilling the original purpose of local collaboratives because we have done all of these things in the past 2 years. And it just took that last leg of intentional coordination to really get here. Because the other thing that I failed to mention is LC3 is one of the lasting and the sustainable LCs around the state. Out of all of the LCs that were first created, there are only about 8 active LCs in the state. And so again, it's really about strengthening community partnerships. It's who are you bringing to the table? How are you engaging with people? How are you digging into your local communities and really assessing what their needs are? So LC3 conducted a really intensive data collection for our community needs assessment, which was both qualitative. We surveyed residents in Doña Ana County about our behavioral health services and what they needed. And then we also brought in quantitative data from the state to complement that. And so that will give us a really comprehensive overview of where behavioral health is at. And then in this past year, we've developed that common agenda, and again, that roadmap or that strategic plan to get us from point A to point B in building the ideal behavioral health system. And then, of course, like you've heard time and time again, LC3 has an evaluator. We work with Dr. Wendy Chi from the University of Colorado about what kind of impact are we having in our community and measuring our progress. Are we going in the right direction? So again, since the 2013 shakeup, we really saw the gap between needs and services. We saw the disrupted collaboration. We saw the fragmented infrastructure. And then we really saw the trust erode, right, with communities and government, communities and providers. And so we really, these are systemic disruptions that we really needed to take a look at and focus how we were going to move forward from these things. So I know that we're getting short on time, but I just wanted to give you a little bit. This is a real small snippet of our community needs data assessment. And really our current state of affairs in the region talks about the needs that we've identified in our data collection, and then what do we want to do with that as we work towards building the ideal behavioral health system. And so it's really important to understand, to have the data and understand what's happening in our community if we're able, so then we're data driven to work forward towards that ideal behavioral health system. And so here were some more needs just around housing. Our housing needs in the community, especially around behavioral health, is really critical. And not only bringing resources, but how are people navigating those resources within the system is really important. So through the data that we collected, we really saw the need for more peer support workers within behavioral health. And so how is LC3 addressing all of those gaps that we saw that came from the data? We call them game changer strategies because we really, again, we're being innovative. We're looking towards building a vision for the future that is different. And so we really want to change the game in behavioral health. And so these are the 5 action teams that came out of our strategic planning session. We want to be the strategic hub for behavioral health in Las Cruces. Of course, we want to increase access and always advocate for clients. We know that we need to work within the education system with children and families. And we know we have a great need in housing in our community. So again, we're working from this point A, working in silos and a fragmented system towards collaborating together for that vision that we want to build. I'm just going to go ahead and pass this because we're getting close to time, and I want to make sure if anybody has any questions that we leave room for that. So really you can see how the collective impact framework directs our work in the LC3. We have a common agenda in identifying the needs and the problem and where we want to go. Together, we hold each other accountable to the data. Are we always keeping the data up front, making sure that That's really what's driving what we're doing. We're measuring our progress. And then this is really important, the mutually reinforcing activities, because you want everybody on the same path, right? Otherwise, you're still creating that fragmentation. And then the continuous communication and the backbone support is so important because you always want to have a centralized place to bring people together. And so that's really important when you're being intentional about collaborative work. And so I just wanted to invite anyone who's interested in becoming an LC3 member. We meet, our next meeting is October 19th. There's more information at our webpage. And then you can always call Jess or I if you'd like to have the Zoom link. We've been trying hybrid meetings. It's not working that well. I think people are really, some people still want to be on Zoom. I think it's convenient. We're still at a challenging time with the pandemic. So that's it. Thank you so much for being interested in what we're doing, and I hope that you learned something today. Again, I appreciate you guys being here. Thank you. And if you have any questions, but I know it's 3 and I know you probably want to get up. And it's kind of a stuffy room, but I'll entertain questions if you'd like.
I have no clue that that's how LC3, that's the reason that's the name, that it's the region or whatever, however it's identified.
Oh, good. I'm glad you learned that today. Brian, I don't know, you're the expert, so what do you think? Anything you'd like to add?
Well, I just, yeah, I'll try and be really brief. The one thing I really like about the collaborative, and not just our collaborative, meaning the district or the county's collaborative that's located here, but this statewide, is that the collaborative, the work that is done at the local level is really intentional and strategic in terms of collecting data, identifying gaps, and mapping out a plan. But I think what's also important for people to understand is that this data and the outcomes that we aspire to achieve is that the collaborative is linked with state a state collaborative, right? Like in the sense of this information ultimately goes to the cabinet secretaries, and recommendations are put forth to the governor in terms of where to potentially where to place some funding and some money and some support. So very much so, this information and this data that's collected does, and fairly quickly and fairly effectively, travel up to the state level, because there are advocates at the state level who are connected to the local collaboratives that push these agendas forward. And with that being said, these local collaboratives are made up with local providers, citizens, youth, families, whoever wants to be involved and can really push that agenda forward. So there have been some results, and because of that connectedness between local and state. And so anyways, I just really want to point that out because, you know, sometimes we're involved in, you know, boards or task forces or this, that, and the other. And you sit in a room, you talk, you leave the room, and that's the extent of it. It's very well intentioned, and it's rare that there's much movement. And so with the collaborative, I see over the years, and it continues to gain momentum, and it continues to gain some outcomes. So I really applaud you and Jess and everybody else who's a part of the collaborative in continuing to push this forward, because it's very important work.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was a really good point. Including, we've been advocating for funding the local collaboratives again, so that we could hopefully restore some of the collaboratives around the state, because we have seen the success and the outcomes and people working together, so.
Yeah, they wouldn't have the data without them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thanks for adding that. Does anyone else have any other questions or comments?
This is probably too big of a subject to entertain in the time before the next session, but the sense of FYI survival after the Hurricane Martinez came through, and La Frontera was Vichy France. It's the sense of this conference also being kind of a sign of that resiliency and reemergence, I think, is very impressive. And I don't know if you can touch on that, but how did FYI survive all of that?
It's all right.
That is big.
So yeah, that might be a topic for a hallway topic tomorrow. But that is, I think, an impressive kind of story of survival and recovery, right? And so kudos to all of you.
Right. Out of the 15, did they all come back to surface again, so to speak?
So of the 15, as the last time I counted, four, including FYI, so 3 others have survived.
Oh, wow, so holy cow.
And just like 2 months ago, the last Arizona provider just left the state. The one of them up north. What was it, Turquoise? I forget, but the last one that came in just left the state.
Yeah, they're in Taos.
In Taos, was
Yeah.
it? Yeah. And so, yeah, of the 15, only four survived and are actively providing services today. Some of them still exist in name because of some lawsuits that continue. But 4 actively provide services to this day.
Oh, wow. That was devastating.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
Cool.
it's a little bit past 3.
Yeah.
We have
Thank you.
On to the main room.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.